KP's Video News. It's KP's Video News, y'all. It's KP's Video News, y'all.
That's right, it's KP's Video News, y'all. And we got to tell this story here because of the sabotage that's going on right now with the U.S. Postal Service. And that's all it is complete sabotage. A smear campaign and sabotage is going on to disrupt the U.S. Postal Service and destroy it, so Trump and his cronies can try to steal this election and possibly try to privatize the Postal Service, which would result in instead of you paying 50 cents for a letter, it could possibly drive your letters up to $4 or $5. I've seen those letters from Europe, in certain parts of Europe, where they're paying $4 for postage on a letter, and it's ridiculous. But this is what he's doing. He's trying to hobble the Postal Service the old-fashioned way. So, on the eve of a highly consequential presidential election, when millions of citizens are eager to protect their health by voting by mail, the U.S. Postal Service bears the burden of expediting a secure election free of partisan tampering. But the officials with power over the agency appear bent on doing exactly the opposite. That is, returning to the old-fashioned tradition of politicizing the post office. The D.C. dunce, Donald Trump, has denigrated America's favorite government service as a joke, and his administration has explored ways to limit mail-in voting, which the president has baselessly characterized as disadvantages to Republicans. In May, the Postal Service's Board of Governors, whose members are appointed by the president, named as Postmaster General a Trump ally, Louis DeJoy, a North Carolina businessman and major Republican donor who lacks postal experience, but, according to news reports, has significant investments in companies that compete or do business with the U.S. Postal Service. Mail began backing up after DeJoy ordered cuts in overtime costs to address the agency's acute financial troubles. On Friday, he announced a reorganization plan that reassigned or displaced 23 executives, including the top two who oversee the day-to-day operations. And if Republicans want to limit voter turnout and raise doubts about the election's integrity, creating chaos within the Postal Service and undermining its independence would be an efficient way to pursue that goal. And past efforts to politicize the mail service were overt, according to the spoil system that President Andrew Jackson, whom Trump admires most among his predecessors, established soon after his election in 1828. The party that won the White House gained the right to award tens of thousands of postal jobs to its supporters, thus securing their loyalty and zeal. The Postmaster General, inevitably a political crony and fixer eager to do what the president's bidding, became a cabinet member who oversaw this immense patronage scheme to shore up his political base. Jackson replaced the Postmaster General he inherited from his rival, President John Quincy Adams, with wheeler dealers who executed a rotation in office policy. Jackson's inexperienced Democratic loyalists replaced many seasonal postal workers who had supported Adams. The strategy also markedly worsened service in the anti-Jackson Northeast. Though the spoil system was reviled through the decades of defenders of good government attempts to reform it, such as the Pendleton Act of 1883, which, among other things, mandated merit-based employment for clerks and carriers in certain post offices, failed to uproot the patronage that supported America's two major political parties for nearly a century and a half. In 1970, President Richard Nixon finally ended the spoils system by signing the Postal Reorganization Act. The law turned what had been the Post Office Department into the modern USPS. The government business hybrid is run by a board of governors nominated by the president and confirmed with the Senate's advice and consent, and a professional postmaster general chosen by that board. Recent president had favored candidates with a demonstrable commitment to the agency and its work. Of the 5 people who have held the top office this century, 4 rose through the ranks: William Henderson, John Potter, Patrick Donahue, Megan Brennan, and the sole exception has been DEJOY, a former logistics industry CEO who gave millions of dollars to the Republican Party, including the Trump campaign. As the president's criticism of the Postal Service mounted this spring, his administration worked to undercut the independence of the agency, which was seeking an emergency loan from the pandemic relief package approved by Congress in March. Treasury Secretary Mnuchin sought to use the loan as leverage to obtain what the Post Office described as sweeping operational control of the Postal Service, including power over senior personnel decisions, package pricing, and service contracts with third-party shippers. Eventually, the Treasury approved a loan subject to less stringent conditions. Meanwhile, the new Postmaster General is hampering the Postal Service's ability to operate. In his short time in office, DEJOY has alarmed postal customers and employees alike by cutting pay for overtime work, such as sorting mail and making extra trips that is sometimes required to ensure prompt delivery. The resulting service slowdown of a day or more have earned DEJOY the nickname Louis Delay. For far more serious, they can undermine the public's confidence in the Postal Service's ability to deliver blank ballots to citizens and then return them to the electoral authorities securely and speedily. Despite the president's assertion that voting by mail would lead to a rigged election, no evidence, absolutely none, indicates that the process is anything other than secure, convenient for citizens, and cost-effective for governments. All states have some form of mail-in voting, which is a universal practice in Colorado, Washington, Utah, Oregon, and Hawaii, far from being a joke. The USPS will be perfectly able to carry out its election duties unless it is hobbled from within. The service's network of more than 3,100 post offices stretched from Alaska to Florida processes some 500 million pieces of mail daily and much more during the winter holiday season. More than 500,000 postal workers, 40% of whom are women and 40% people of color, deliver mail to every address in the country 6 days a week. That's every single address of the country. The financial crisis now threatening the the Postal Service has deep roots, and the trouble began after 2001 as email shrank the volume of first-class letter mail and was compounded by the disastrous Postal Accountability and Enhancement Act of 2006. The law restricted the USPS ability to offer new services and adjust its pricing to reflect its costs, and worse, required it to pre-fund its retirees' health care benefits far into the future, saddling with billions of dollars in payments. The cuts that DEJOY has ordered in response to financial crisis have been alarmed lawmakers on both parties at a time when the government is bailing out airlines, fast food restaurants, fossil fuel producers, and other businesses hurt by the pandemic. Congress must accept that the USPS is really too big to fail and supply it with immediate emergency funding as well, without conditions that subject it to micromanagement by political appointees. Then legislators must restore its health by enacting common sense reforms, including forgiving the service's current debt to the Treasury and allowing it to restructure the funding of its retirees' health care benefits. The service should also be allowed to raise its prices modestly, cut costly essentials such as Saturday letter delivery, and bargain more effectively with its unions. Throughout its long history as our democracy's unifier and equalizer, the postal system has responded flexibly to American needs. In 1792, the founders used it to create and inform electorate by delivering cheap, uncensored newspapers to the far-flung citizenry. And the turn of the 20th century, the post office protected the American public from rapacious transportation and banking monopolies by providing low-cost parcel post and postal banking. For its challenges, the mail has been the central nervous system of American democracy for over 245 years. And the coronavirus pandemic has made it more essential now than any time in memory. Even amid partisanship and fragmentation, our national delivery system, still the best in the world, must continue to support the democratic process, and the growing demand for voting by mail should be a reason to shore up the Postal Service and shield it from political interference, not force it to a halt. And so what's going on now as a result of what Trump is trying to do, the House Oversight Chair introduces a bill to freeze Postal Service changes. And the House Oversight and Reform Committee Chairwoman Carolyn Maloney today introduced legislation that would block the U.S. Postal Service from implementing a series of changes amid the coronavirus pandemic. The Delivering for America Act would prevent USPS from instituting shifts to its operations or to the level of service that it was back at the beginning of 2020. The bill comes as Maloney and other Democrats increasingly speak out against the decision made at the USPS during a year in which the presidential election will rely more heavily on mail-in voting. Our postal system should not become an instrument of partisan politics, but instead must be protected as a neutral, independent entity that focuses on one thing and one thing only: delivering the mail. Maloney said in a statement, "At this juncture in our nation's history, when the number of Americans voting by mail for this presidential election is expected to more than double from the last, Congress must protect the right of all eligible citizens to have their vote counted. A once-in-a-century pandemic is no time to enact changes that threaten service reliability and transparency. The bill would reverse these changes, and so its fundamental American service can continue to be unimpeded." In a news release announcing the legislation, Maloney's office cited multiple memos released by the USPS earlier this year that included details about new policies and the organization's restructuring. Maloney also cited the millions in campaign contributions to President Trump from the Postmaster General Louis DeJoy, who assumed the post in June. The action of the Postal Service have gained attention in recent weeks amid concerns about how prepared the agency is for a surge in mail-in voting. Some Democrats say that DeJoy's cost-cutting moves, including reducing overtime and adjusting delivery policies, could only make things more difficult for the agency. Maloney in early August announced that she had invited DeJoy to appear before the oversight panel on September 17 for a hearing examining operation changes to the USPS. She also, among a group of Democratic senators and House members who sent a letter to the USPS Inspector General last week requesting an investigation into recent staffing and policy changes under the Trump administration appointee. The letter was sent just days after DeJoy announced that the service was removing two top officials in charge of day-to-day operations. Organizational chart also showed that 23 postal executives were reassigned and the 5 staffers left their positions, for new roles in leadership. USPS has forced and faced mounting financial challenges, which have been compounded by the pandemic. The agency reported last Friday that it had lost more than $2 billion between April and June, with DEJOY attributing to the losses to substantial declines in mail volume. And so they're sabotaging the Postal Service. Don't believe the hype. Don't believe the lies that they're trying to tell you out there about the Postal Service can't do this and they can't do that, when the U.S. Postal Service handles all that mail that the post office handles on April 15th. All those tax papers that the Postal Service handles and gets out in one day, in one day's time. So you're talking about millions and millions and millions. So no, they're lying. They're lying. If they're telling you that the post office can't handle it, can't handle that mail, when they handle billions of letters, billions, not millions, billions of letters. So it's a total lie, and it's a catastrophe that's going on right now, and it's definitely outright voter fraud. That's the real voter fraud and the real voter suppression that's going on with the Republicans and with Trump. So it's an update on this guy over here. I haven't heard much about him lately, and this is a new case that just came up about an hour ago, and 3 men are charged in schemes to harass, bribe alleged victims of R. Kelly. Here we go, R. Kelly again in the news. Federal prosecutors in New York arrested and announced charges against 3 men relating to their efforts to harass, intimidate, threaten, or corruptly influence individuals named as alleged victims in the case against R&B singer R. Kelly, according to court documents and a Justice Department news release. Richard Arline Jr., 31, Donnell Russell, 45, and Michael Williams, 37, are all charged in 3 separate alleged schemes. Arline Jr., self-proclaimed longtime friend of R. Kelly, who wanted to pay one of R. Kelly's alleged victims $500,000 in exchange for the victim not cooperating with federal authorities. According to prosecutors, the prosecutors said some of those conversations were recorded on a wiretap. The documents said Arline Jr. Said on a wiretap call, "If I had a way to talk to R. Kelly, being next to him and telling him what's going on without nobody listening to, no feds, nobody, he's going to pay her off to be quiet because she's got too much. She's got too much." Prosecutors said Russell, a self-described manager, advisor, and friend to R. Kelly, harassed and attempted to intimidate an alleged victim of R. Kelly. The criminal complaint said Russell allegedly threatened to reveal sexually explicit photos of the victim if she didn't withdraw a civil suit filed against the singer. Prosecutors said Russell posted sexually explicit photos of the woman on Facebook page he created called Surviving Lies, a name that prosecutors said is a play on the title of Lifetime documentary series Surviving R. Kelly, and posted screenshots of text messages between Russell and the woman with those images. Williams, who a prosecutor said is a relative of a person who once served as R. Kelly's publicist, allegedly set fire to an SUV parked at the Florida residence of one of R. Kelly's alleged victims. In recent years, the Grammy-winning singer has faced a wave of allegations from women who claimed he subjected them to sexual, physical, and emotional abuse over decades. The musician, whose real name is Robert Kelly, has consistently denied allegations of sexual misconduct, and acting U.S. attorney said the crimes were intended to undermine and subvert the integrity of the criminal justice system and victimize the women who have come forward with serious allegations of criminal conduct against the defendant R. Kelly. And Peter Fitzhugh, special agent in charge of Homeland Security investigations, said the men charged today, that is today, right today, have shown that there is no line that they will not cross to help R. Kelly avoid the consequences of his alleged crimes, even if it means re-victimizing his accusers. And all three have been taken into federal custody over the past 2 days, and a department spokesman for the Justice Department stated. And R. Kelly in trouble again. Now he got people out there trying to bribe and harass the witnesses in his cases against him. So this thing ain't over. R. Kelly's never gonna get out. You might as well realize it. You're not gonna ever get out. You got cases in about 5 states. You got federal charges. Now you got these charges coming up that are gonna be added to your case. So no, you'll never get out. It'll be a miracle.
It's KP's Video News, y'all.
Peace.